December 23, 1944. 0630 hours. The frozen forest outside Bastogne, Belgium. Through morning mist thick as wool, something impossible was unfolding. A single American officer atop a disabled Sherman tank was holding an entire Volksgrenadier battalion at bay. The elite troops of the 26th Volksgrenadier Division, veterans hardened in the crucible of the Eastern Front, were being systematically repelled by what appeared to be a lone figure who refused to retreat. Behind German lines, 4 assault guns and 200 infantry stood paralyzed, their commanders baffled by resistance that tactical manuals said could not exist. The 180 men of the reinforced German battalion had stumbled into a scenario that Wehrmacht doctrine deemed impossible, one American defending a critical crossroads against combined mechanized infantry assault for over 90 minutes. The mathematics defied comprehension. 42 freezing, exhausted paratroopers against 200 German veterans and 4 assault guns. By every calculation of military science, the American position should have collapsed within 20 minutes. Instead, for 1 frozen hour and a half, 2nd Lieutenant Jack Wesley Thornton would demonstrate that courage is not the absence of fear, but action despite it. The journey to that frozen crossroads began in the coal mining valleys of West Virginia, where Jack Thornton was born on March 14, 1920, to a family that knew hardship intimately. The eldest of 9 children, Thornton's childhood was marked by relentless poverty and premature responsibility. His father died in a mine collapse when Jack was 13. His mother worked 16-hour days at a textile mill, leaving young Jack as guardian to his 8 siblings. "If I can't bring home wages, my brothers and sisters don't eat," Thornton told his schoolteacher, Miss Eleanor Wright, explaining why he was dropping out at 15. "Books won't feed them. Work will." But the mines that had killed his father now rejected his son as too slight. Standing 5 feet 6 inches and weighing barely 120 pounds, Thornton was turned away from every mining company in Logan County. Too small, they said. Too weak. Too young. Desperate, Thornton found work in the forests, logging timber for $2 a day. The work built wiry strength in his frame and taught him to read terrain, to move silently through woods, to understand how forests concealed and revealed. When war erupted in Europe, Thornton saw opportunity. The military offered steady pay, training, and purpose beyond mere survival. He enlisted on December 15, 1941, 8 days after Pearl Harbor, lying about his age to join at 17. But even the military nearly rejected him. Too short for the Marines. Too light for the Armored Corps. The Navy wouldn't take him. Finally, the airborne accepted him for parachute infantry, drawn by his agility and fearlessness during training jumps. Private First Class Marcus Dalton, who trained alongside Thornton at Fort Benning, later wrote, "We called him Sparrow at first, on account of his size. This skinny kid from the mountains who looked like a strong wind would knock him over. But when he hit the obstacle course, we stopped laughing. He moved like water, smooth and fast. And on the rifle range, he shot expert scores every single time. There was something about his eyes during live fire exercises. They went flat, emotionless, like flipping a switch from human to weapon." Thornton's transformation from Appalachian logger to lethal soldier accelerated during the invasion of Sicily in July 1943. Company E, 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 82nd Airborne Division, dropped behind German lines near Gela as part of Operation Husky. In the chaos of the night jump, Thornton's stick was scattered across 5 miles of enemy territory. He landed alone in an olive grove, miles from his objective, surrounded by German positions. For 3 days, Thornton operated independently behind enemy lines. Moving only at night, he navigated by stars and terrain, avoiding German patrols through a combination of patience and woodcraft learned in West Virginia forests. He sabotaged 2 ammunition trucks with grenades, cut telephone lines, and reached his company's rally point having lost not a single piece of equipment. Captain Raymond Harris wrote in his after-action report, "Private Thornton displayed initiative and tactical acumen far beyond his rank and experience. His ability to evade detection while inflicting damage suggests natural aptitude for independent operations in hostile territory. The Italian campaign honed Thornton into something more than a skilled soldier. At Salerno, when his platoon leader was killed by mortar fire, Thornton organized the surviving 12 men into a defensive position that held against a company-strength counterattack for 6 hours. Using captured German stick grenades and a single Browning automatic rifle, he directed interlocking fields of fire that broke 3 successive German assaults. For this action, he received the Silver Star and a field promotion to sergeant. At Anzio, Thornton's squad was tasked with holding a farmhouse positioned on critical high ground. For 8 days, under continuous artillery bombardment and repeated infantry attacks, Thornton's 11 men held the position. They ran out of rations on day 4. Ammunition nearly exhausted by day 6. 2 men wounded, unable to be evacuated. Thornton organized resupply runs under cover of darkness, personally crawling 500 yards through no man's land to retrieve ammunition from disabled vehicles. When relief finally arrived, the battalion commander found Thornton's squad still combat effective, still holding their position. The farmhouse was later nicknamed Thornton's Alamo. By Operation Market Garden in September 1944, Sergeant Thornton had survived Sicily, Salerno, Anzio, and the liberation of Rome. He had been wounded 3 times, always refusing evacuation beyond immediate treatment. He had personally accounted for over 60 enemy casualties. But more importantly, he had earned something rare in combat, absolute trust. The men of 3rd Platoon, Company E, would follow Jack Thornton anywhere because he never asked them to take risks he wouldn't take first. Lieutenant Colonel James Burrows recognized this quality and field commissioned Thornton to 2nd Lieutenant on October 22, 1944. Thornton doesn't lead through orders, Burrows noted. He leads through example. Men follow him because they know he'll bring them home if humanly possible. By December 1944, as the 82nd Airborne deployed to Belgium in response to the German Ardennes offensive, Lieutenant Thornton commanded 3rd Platoon, Company E. The Battle of the Bulge had created chaos across the American lines. Entire divisions were surrounded, cut off, fighting desperately against Germany's last great offensive. The 101st Airborne was encircled at Bastogne. The 82nd was rushed north to stabilize the crumbling northern shoulder of the German penetration. Company E's mission was to hold the crossroads southeast of Bastogne, a seemingly minor objective that controlled the only paved road suitable for German armor trying to exploit the breakthrough. Lose the crossroads, and German tanks could swing behind Bastogne, completing its encirclement. For Company E, the situation was desperate even before combat began. 9 days of continuous fighting in brutal winter conditions had reduced the company from 140 men to 42 effectives. They were exhausted, frostbitten, low on ammunition, and psychologically battered. Most had not slept more than a few hours in the past week. Food consisted of cold K rations when available. The temperature hovered around 15 degrees Fahrenheit with wind that made exposed skin painful within minutes. Lieutenant Thornton's platoon, the strongest remaining element, numbered just 19 men. Private James Keller described their condition: "We were finished. Completely done. Half of us had frostbite so bad we couldn't feel our feet. We'd been fighting since December 16 with maybe 3 hours sleep total. Our weapons were freezing up. We had barely enough ammunition for a short firefight, and command was telling us to hold this crossroads against what intelligence said was a full German battalion. We knew it was a suicide mission. But Lieutenant Thornton never said that. He just said, 'We hold until relieved. No German gets past this crossroads.' And somehow, we believed him. December 23 dawned gray and merciless. Dense fog rolled through the Ardennes forests, reducing visibility to less than 100 yards. The temperature remained brutally cold. Snow lay 3 feet deep in drifts, though the road itself had been churned to ice by military traffic. Company E held positions along the southern edge of a clearing, approximately 400 yards wide, with the critical crossroads at its center. Thornton positioned his forces with calculated precision. His platoon held the center, with 2 squads flanking the road. A single Sherman tank, disabled with thrown tracks but with operational gun and machine guns, sat at the crossroads itself, providing the only armored support. 2 machine gun teams covered the approaches. Thornton established his command post in a shallow ravine 30 yards behind the crossroads, connected by runner to each position. The German attack was heralded by artillery that began at 0545 hours. Shells screamed through the morning fog, detonating in the trees and across the clearing with terrifying randomness. For 40 minutes, Company E endured the barrage, huddled in frozen foxholes, praying the next shell would land elsewhere. When the barrage finally lifted at 0625, the German assault materialized from the fog like gray ghosts. Private Michael Torres spotted them first. Through the fog, you could see them coming. At least 200 infantry in winter camouflage, moving in textbook assault formation. And behind them, for assault guns, their guns traversing, searching for targets. It was the most professional attack I'd ever seen. These weren't green troops. These were Eastern Front veterans who knew exactly what they were doing. Thornton's first command decision was to hold fire until the Germans reached 150 yards. Let them commit to the attack. Let them believe they faced weak or demoralized resistance. At 140 yards, Thornton gave the order, fire. The 2 machine guns opened simultaneously, raking the German formation with converging fire. The Sherman's machine gun added its weight. Rifles barked from concealed positions. The German advance staggered as men fell, but these were not troops who panicked easily. German squad leaders barked orders. The formation spread wider, using terrain folds for cover. The assault guns began suppressive fire, their high explosive rounds detonating across American positions. Within minutes, 1 American machine gun position took a direct hit, killing both men instantly. The Sherman fired its 75mm gun, the concussion shockingly loud, destroying 1 German assault gun with a flanking shot through its thinner side armor. But return fire disabled the Sherman's gun mechanism, leaving only its machine gun operational. German infantry pressed closer, now within 75 yards. Thornton realized his defensive line was too thin, too weak to stop this assault. The Germans would overrun the position within minutes. He had 2 choices: order his men to fall back, abandoning the crossroads but preserving lives, or make a stand that would likely kill them all. In that moment, Lieutenant Jack Wesley Thornton made the decision that would define his life. He grabbed a Browning automatic rifle from a wounded soldier, climbed onto the disabled Sherman tank at the crossroads, and opened fire from its exposed turret. From the elevated position atop the Sherman, Thornton had a panoramic view of the battlefield. He could see German infantry advancing through the fog, see their assault guns maneuvering for better firing positions, see his own men fighting desperately from inadequate cover. And he became the focal point of the entire German attack. Standing fully exposed atop the tank, Thornton fired the bar in controlled bursts, targeting German squad leaders and machine gun teams with precision that belied the weapon's bulk. The Browning automatic rifle was a devastating weapon in skilled hands. It fired 30 caliber rounds at 500 rounds per minute with effective range exceeding 500 yards. Each 20-round magazine lasted approximately 2.5 seconds of continuous fire, requiring constant reloading. Thornton had trained extensively with the bar during airborne school, mastering the weapon's tendency to climb during full automatic fire. Now, standing exposed, he used that training to methodical effect. German troops trying to advance toward the American left flank were cut down by accurate bursts. A German machine gun team setting up their weapon found their position swept by fire that killed the gunner and scattered the crew. Squad leaders attempting to rally their men became priority targets, disrupting German tactical cohesion. Private Keller watched from his foxhole in shock. Lieutenant Thornton was standing on top of that tank like he was invincible, like bullets couldn't touch him. Germans were shooting at him from every direction, and he just kept firing, changing magazines, firing again. I saw him drop Germans at ranges I wouldn't have thought possible with a bar. It was the most insane, courageous thing I ever witnessed." The Germans, professional soldiers with years of combat experience, recognized the threat immediately. The assault guns shifted fire toward the Sherman, their high explosive rounds detonating around it, throwing frozen earth and shrapnel in all directions. Infantry machine guns concentrated on the exposed American officer. Rifle fire peppered the tank's hull and turret. Thornton was operating in what military tacticians call the fatal funnel, where all enemy fire converges on a single point. By every statistical probability, he should have been hit within the first minute. Yet somehow, through combination of the obscuring fog, the smoke from burning vehicles, and perhaps simple luck, Thornton remained unhit. He continued firing with mechanical precision, calling corrections to his machine gunners between bar bursts, coordinating fire so that no German could advance without facing interlocking fields of fire. At approximately 0645, 20 minutes into the assault, Thornton's elevated position allowed him to see something his ground-level troops could not: a German flanking force, approximately 50 men, moving through the forest to the American right. If they succeeded, they would roll up the entire defensive line. Thornton shouted orders to his second-in-command, Sergeant Paul Dietrich, redirecting the remaining machine gun to cover the flank. But the machine gun alone couldn't stop 50 men. So Thornton climbed down from the Sherman, ran 40 yards through open ground under fire, and personally organized 6 men into a hasty defensive position facing the German flank attack. Using his bar and the rifleman's concentrated fire, Thornton broke the flanking attempt, killing at least 12 Germans and forcing the survivors back into the forest. Then he ran back to the Sherman and resumed his exposed position. The audacity, the apparent invincibility of this one American officer, began to affect German morale. Soldiers who had fought on the Eastern Front, who had faced Soviet human wave attacks and survived, found themselves hesitating before this single figure who seemed impossible to kill. German officers attempted to rally their men, but the psychological impact of Thornton's stand was tangible. One man was stopping their advance. One man refusing to die. One man defying everything their training said was possible. At 0710, 45 minutes into the battle, Thornton's ammunition situation became critical. He had exhausted the bar magazines from the wounded soldier. He climbed down briefly, collected magazines from casualties, and continued firing. His hands were numb from cold, making magazine changes clumsy. His ears rang from constant gunfire. Frost formed on his eyebrows and beard from his own breath. Yet he showed no sign of retreating. German casualty reports later recovered from captured documents indicated their attack had stalled with 38 dead and over 60 wounded. The assault guns, unable to advance without infantry support, maintained suppressive fire but could not dislodge the American position. Battalion commanders radioed for reinforcements, unable to explain why their attack against a tiny American force had failed. At 0730, Thornton spotted German infantry preparing for another assault, this time supported by all 3 remaining assault guns advancing in line. This would be the decisive moment. His own forces were nearly spent. Ammunition critically low. 6 men dead, 9 wounded. The machine gun had jammed from cold and fouled barrel. If the Germans pressed this attack with determination, they would overrun the position. Thornton made his most desperate decision of the battle. Using the Sherman's radio, still functional despite the disabled gun, he called artillery support from division headquarters. But rather than calling fire on the German assembly area, he called it on the crossroads itself. On his own position. The artillery officer, Captain Nicholas Hansen, refused initially, recognizing that such fire would kill Thornton and any Americans near the crossroads. But Thornton invoked his command authority. "This is Lieutenant Thornton, Company E. I am ordering fire mission coordinates 473295, danger close, my position. Execute immediately or the crossroads falls." The first artillery shells landed 60 yards from the Sherman. The explosions were earth-shattering, detonating with violence that threw frozen soil and metal fragments in deadly arcs. Germans caught in the open were killed or wounded in dozens. The assault guns, suddenly facing artillery fire, reversed course, withdrawing to safer positions. The German infantry attack dissolved into chaos. Men who had been steeling themselves for the assault now sought cover, their tactical cohesion shattered by high explosive shells landing in their midst. Thornton remained atop the Sherman throughout the artillery barrage, adjusting fire via radio, calling corrections that walked the shells through the German formation with devastating accuracy. Shrapnel from the nearest detonations peppered the Sherman's hull. One fragment tore through Thornton's left shoulder, spinning him partly around, but he steadied himself and continued directing fire. For 10 minutes, American artillery pulverized the German assault. When the barrage finally lifted, the battlefield was transformed. Smoke hung thick over torn earth. German formations had withdrawn into the forest, their attack broken. Survivors carried wounded comrades away from the killing ground. The assault guns had retreated entirely. At 0745, 90 minutes after the German attack began, 2nd Lieutenant Jack Wesley Thornton climbed down from the Sherman tank. Blood soaked his left shoulder from the shrapnel wound. His hands trembled from adrenaline and cold. His uniform was scorched from near-miss explosions. Behind him, the Sherman's hull was pockmarked with bullet impacts and shrapnel scars. Around the crossroads, the evidence of battle was undeniable. German bodies lay scattered across the frozen field. American casualties had been heavy, 8 dead, 12 wounded from a platoon of 19. Yet the crossroads remained in American hands. Sergeant Dietrich met Thornton as he walked back to friendly lines. Lieutenant Thornton was steady, utterly calm. He asked for a casualty count, made sure medics were treating the wounded, then sat down against a tree and closed his eyes. He didn't sleep, just sat there, breathing slowly. I realized his hands were shaking but his face showed nothing. No emotion, no fear, just exhaustion. Later he told me he'd been terrified the entire time, certain he was going to die. But he climbed that tank anyway because someone had to. The German forces never attacked the crossroads again. That evening, under cover of darkness, the 26th Volksgrenadier Division withdrew from the sector entirely, redirecting their offensive toward less stubbornly defended objectives. American reinforcements arrived at the crossroads on December 24, relieving Company E's survivors. The strategic impact of Thornton's stand extended beyond the immediate tactical victory. By holding the crossroads, Company E prevented German armor from exploiting a critical vulnerability in the Bastogne perimeter. The delay forced German commanders to commit reserves along different routes, diluting their offensive power at a moment when concentrated force might have achieved breakthrough. General Anthony McAuliffe, commanding the besieged 101st Airborne at Bastogne, later wrote, "The defense of the southeastern crossroads by elements of the 82nd Airborne, particularly the extraordinary action of Lieutenant Thornton, contributed materially to our ability to hold Bastogne. By denying that approach route, they forced German forces into prepared killing zones where we could defeat them in detail." Within weeks, the German Ardennes offensive collapsed entirely, the last desperate gamble of the Third Reich ending in catastrophic failure. The official Medal of Honor citation presented by General Dwight Eisenhower on March 8, 1945, captured the military's assessment, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond a call of duty. Second Lieutenant Thornton voluntarily exposed himself to intense enemy fire by climbing atop an exposed position, where he directed defensive fires and personally engaged enemy forces with devastating effect. Despite being wounded, he continued his defense and called artillery fire on his own position to break the enemy attack. His extraordinary heroism and selfless devotion to duty resulted in the successful defense of a critical position and inspired his men to hold against overwhelming odds. Yet the medal ceremony was bittersweet for Thornton. By March 1945, only 4 men from his original platoon remained alive and unwounded. Most of the men he had led at the crossroads were dead or permanently disabled. The weight of survival, of living when so many had died, became a burden Thornton carried silently. After the war, Thornton struggled profoundly with what we now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder. He experienced chronic nightmares, waking screaming in darkness, reliving the moment shells detonated around the Sherman. He suffered hypervigilance, unable to relax in public spaces, always scanning for threats. Loud noises caused panic attacks. He avoided crowds. Sleep deprivation from insomnia led to depression. His first marriage, to his high school sweetheart Sarah Mitchell, collapsed after 18 months. Mitchell later described, "Jack wasn't the same man who left West Virginia. He couldn't sleep through the night. He kept weapons near at all times. He'd wake up swinging, lost in some battle I couldn't see. He tried to hide it, tried to be normal, but the war had taken something from him that he couldn't get back." Despite personal struggles, Thornton became an early advocate for veterans facing similar psychological wounds. In 1952, he testified before Congress about the need for mental health services for returning veterans, one of the first Medal of Honor recipients to speak publicly about combat trauma. "We train men to kill, to face death, to endure unimaginable stress," Thornton testified. "Then we send them home and expect them to simply forget, to return to normal life as if nothing happened. That's not possible. We owe our veterans treatment, understanding, and support. I was lucky to receive help. Most veterans aren't. That must change." Thornton's advocacy contributed to expanded Veterans Administration mental health programs throughout the 1950s and 1960s, helping tens of thousands of veterans receive treatment they desperately needed. The Jack Thornton Memorial VA Clinic, opened in Charleston, West Virginia, in 1978, specializes in PTSD treatment, a living legacy of his efforts. Military analysis of Thornton's action at the crossroads has become standard curriculum at the U.S. Army Infantry School. His integration of personal firepower, artillery support, and tactical positioning demonstrates principles that remain relevant: use of terrain, concentration of force at decisive points, maintaining moral authority through personal example. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen, writing in the Army War College Quarterly, analyzed Thornton's leadership. "What distinguishes Thornton's action is not superhuman courage, but moral courage, the willingness to risk everything to fulfill his duty. He didn't climb that tank because he was fearless. He did it because his men needed him to, because the mission required it, because someone had to." That calculus, duty over self-preservation, defines the highest form of military leadership. On the morning of December 23, 1944, 2nd Lieutenant Jack Wesley Thornton proved that individual human will could overcome overwhelming material disadvantage. His stand at that frozen crossroads shattered German assumptions about American resolve. These weren't soft, unprepared troops the Nazi propaganda machine portrayed. They were the sons of miners and farmers and factory workers, forged by economic depression and hardship, capable of extraordinary resilience when defending their comrades. Today, the crossroads southeast of Bastogne is marked by a simple stone monument. The inscription reads, "Here, Lieutenant Jack Wesley Thornton, 82nd Airborne Division, held the line. December 23, 1944. Each December, a small ceremony is held. Belgian citizens, American veterans, occasionally German visitors, gather to remember the morning one American soldier refused to retreat. Thornton himself rarely spoke about that day. In a 1969 interview, 3 years before his death in a car accident at age 52, he reflected, "People ask if I was a hero that morning. I don't think so. I was terrified every moment. I climbed that tank because if I didn't, my men would die trying. That's not heroism, that's duty. Real heroism is the medic who treats wounded under fire, the private who stays at his post when every instinct screams to run, the wife who holds her family together while her husband fights nightmares he can't explain. Those are the real heroes. I just did what the situation required." Yet history judges differently. Jack Thornton's stand represents something essential about human courage. It is not absence of fear, but action despite fear when others depend on you. It is not superhuman strength, but ordinary people rising to extraordinary challenges when circumstances demand it. The Germans were shocked that morning because they encountered something their tactical doctrine couldn't account for: one man for whom duty, loyalty, and love of comrades mattered more than survival. That morning, a coal miner's son from West Virginia who had been rejected as too small, too weak, too insignificant, stopped an entire German battalion. Not through superior weapons or numbers, but through refusal to surrender while his men still needed him. In war, as in life, that transformation from ordinary individual to extraordinary force of will remains the most powerful weapon. The boy who couldn't feed his family became the man who wouldn't abandon his brothers. That truth, demonstrated atop a frozen tank on a December morning in Belgium, echoes across generations as reminder: courage is not what you are born with, but what you become when others need you most.